Well, hello everyone, it's John Laughland here. I'm the director of Forum for Democracy International. Welcome to this week's forum. My co-host Peter Lavelle and I am delighted to welcome as our main guest this week, Eric van der Beek. Eric and I met a couple of years ago. I interviewed Eric when I was doing a show from the studio in Amsterdam. And we spoke then, Eric, a couple of years ago about the MH17 case. MH17, for those who might not know, is the flight number of the Malaysian airliner that was shot down over Ukraine in July 2014. The shooting, Russia was of course accused of the shooting. And Eric, when we met a couple of years ago, you were already working very intensively on MH17. You'd written a book by then, but now you've published your book in English. And again, for those of our viewers who may not know you, I think it's safe to say that you are by far the best person in the world, best informed person in the world about the MH17 case. You have followed this more than anybody else. You listened in, you were present, I believe, at all the hearings of the trial which took place in a Dutch court. At the time in July 2014, when I was in my previous job, I had been following, like many people, the barrage of information, or rather disinformation, about Russia, which ranged over a very wide range of things. But when the MH17 airliner was shot down, I didn't find the official accusation that Donbass rebels had done it. I didn't find that accusation implausible, unlike many other accusations made against Russia. It seemed to me to be a plausible accusation. So I kept an open mind. Of course, I knew people at the time, my friend Xavier Moreau, who said that Ukraine had shot it down from a fighter jet. But it didn't seem to me to be a completely impossible scenario. On the contrary, the Donbass rebels had been bombed by Kiev, by the Kiev forces. They presumably wanted or had anti-aircraft protection systems. So the general narrative didn't seem to me to be completely impossible, unlike so many other things that were being said at the time. So Eric, perhaps you could explain to us and to our viewers why it is. Yeah,
John, just to add on what you were saying here, because I remember it vividly. It was the only time I was on CNN because they were asked me to explain what was going on, and I explained I'm just a television guy. I'm not the government, which of course they made me speak for the Russian government. And I just said, I don't know what happened. You don't know what happened, but the U.S. State Department, 15 minutes after it happened, said the Russians did it. Okay. Yeah. And I challenged him. I said, the United States spends at that time $800 million a year on its defense and surveillance. And you can't tell me what was over the skies of Ukraine. No one can tell us. The Russians could have been more forthcoming, but they didn't want to expose their intelligence capacity. And that's been a criticism of the Russian government, even here. So, John's right. I mean, what's possible was plausible, but that was not in the air at the time. It was immediate who was to blame. Sorry to interrupt, John. Go ahead, Eric.
No, not at all. Anyway, Eric, let's just, if you could just talk us through the conclusions that you have come to in your book. Go ahead, Eric.
Well, as you mentioned, John, I was there, during the MH17 trial. So this trial was 2020, from 2020 until 2022. Well, there were 69 court sessions. I was there. I've seen them all. I've heard them all. I made, I recorded them. So I I must have watched them 2-3 times. Well, I didn't. And then in 2022, the court came up with its verdict, and the verdict was that of 3 of the 4 men who stood trial, they were, they got lifelong sentences, and so and one of them was acquitted. So this was Oleg Pulatov. He was the only one who was, there were these two Dutch lawyers. They were defending him, and he was the only one who was acquitted.
So the only defendant who had a defense was acquitted. The others didn't contest the case. They were tried in absentia. But they were all tried in absentia, indeed. But he had lawyers.
Yes. So I think this is why he was acquitted, But then I found the verdict didn't convince me. I think there was no conclusive evidence that Russia was somehow involved in the downing of MH17. I've seen no convincing, let alone conclusive evidence for this verdict. Okay, these four men were standing trial. They were not standing a trial for having pushed the button or for, giving the shooting order. They were convinced of having asked for a book tailor. So this is the alleged murder weapon in Russia, and the transport of this book tailor, air defense missile. So yes, here in the middle you can see here this is the book tailor. The other vehicles you see on this picture are part of the book system. There's a radar. There's a radar system. There's a command vehicle. There's a tail. It doesn't have a radar. On the left hand side you see a book tail, and in the middle on front you see a book tailor. It has a built-in radar system. So this is the alleged murder weapon, and it is said to have been transported from Russia to Ukraine.
Yes.
Eric, how old are these books? The ones that were the mechanism that actually shot down the plane? Because from what I understand, they were no longer in service in the Russian military.
Well, yeah, they were still in service. Only some missiles that contain these bow tie fragments, they were not in service anymore, or so the Russian Defense Ministry said. But these book
they certainly were in service in the Ukrainian military.
Yes, they were still in service. They were also in service in Ukraine, and in fact, Dutch in court during the Dutch trial. There was this, they spoke about this report of the Dutch military intelligence service that based on intelligence of Western intelligence, several Ukrainian book tailors were present in the eastern Ukraine in the months June and July 2014. So it was July 17 when MH17 was downed. So there were Ukrainian book tellers present in the eastern Ukraine while MH17 was shot down. So I think this is the most important part of the case, because even if you take it for a fact that MH17 was downed by a book missile, it could have been a missile fired by a Ukrainian unit, a Ukrainian book tailor. So maybe we can see this picture on screen, because this was a slide that was presented in court on the basis of Western intelligence, the positions of the Ukrainian book tailors. There it is. So in the red circle, you see MH17, its last position, according to the flight data recorder and according to Russian primary radar data. And then the green and red dots, those are Ukrainian book tellers in the months June and July. So this is, it's a combined picture, so it's MH17 flying there. So, but this is not 17 July, this is June and July. These book tellers were seen by Western intelligence in June and July.
And these are all in the hands of Ukrainian forces, of Kiev forces.
Yeah.
These
Yes.
both green and red.
Yes, they were. Yes, yes. And those in red they were said to have been defect.
Yes,
it's not
defective.
operational.
Yeah.
And it's important to understand that. Okay, so none of these were at shooting range distance of MH17, as you can see, because this red circle, it's a radius of 36 kilometers. Because this is the shooting range of Buk missile. You cannot reach further than 36 kilometers with a Buk missile. So, but these Buk TLRs, these vehicles, can be moved within hours from one place to another. So they could have, on the 17th of July, they could have been moved, within a shooting distance of MH17. There's no proof something like this happened, but if there's no evidence, it doesn't mean that it didn't happen. It didn't happen.
And if we know from Western, you say that map comes from Western intelligence sources.
Mm-hmm.
Do we conclude then that they don't know if there were any Russian-controlled books in the region?
There were no Russian Buk TLRs spotted by Western intelligence. So this is no.
Well,
So,
yes. Eric, it's flashing back to me like it was yesterday. The flight path. I mean, it was very crowded. It was very near going over a war zone. Mm-hmm. There was talk at the time that Putin's plane was in that path, that maybe some nefarious forces, I won't name them, wanted to shoot that down. I want to ask you a question. The preeminent expert on this, so I feel gifted right now. Is it remotely possible in your mind this was just a mistake?
I find it hard to believe, because this is one scenario that I investigated. I contacted. So Finland was the only country in Europe that ever used Buk systems. So I contacted a former commander of a Finnish Buk battalion. I had this correspondence with him for over a year. I went to his museum, because he is the director now of a air defense museum in the north of Helsinki. And I even went in some of these Buk systems, in the Buk TLR. So he told me all about the nuts and the handles and the control panel. And I asked him time and again, imagine a scenario in which this could have been a mistake, but he couldn't name a single one, because MH17 was flying at 10 kilometers altitude. It was flying over 900 kilometers per hour, straight to the Russian border. It came from Amsterdam and it went over Ukraine. And if it hadn't been shot down, it would have been in Russia within 3 minutes or so. It was flying in a known civil airline corridor. Before MH17 was shot down, already a dozen or so civil airplanes had passed this corridor. So, for a fighter plane or for a military transport plane to drop bombs or to drop troops or what have you, you have to go slower, before you reach the contact zone, and you have to fly lower, and you have to fly lower your speed, and lower your speed and fly lower, fly the altitude. So about 5 kilometers, if you fly higher than 5 kilometers, and at over, you can drop bombs, but not higher than 5 kilometers and at such speed. It's impossible. So this former Buck commander, his name is Esa Kelonimi, he convinced me, it would have been impossible at this speed and at this altitude for a trained book crew to mistake such airplane for a foe, for attack plane or for a military transport plane.
That's very interesting, because of course the claim is that the Russian rebels, the Donbass rebels, did do it by mistake. Is that not right? I mean, the official version is that it was a mistake. They weren't trying to shoot it down. They were presumably trying to shoot something else.
This is what was said by the Public Prosecution Service and also by European Court for Human Rights. Because in last month they reached their verdict also, and they said it was a mistake, and Russia should have been more careful. But they never put evidence, before us that it was a mistake, because those who shot down MH17, we don't know who they were. We don't know who pushed the button. We don't know who gave the shooting order. We don't know why these persons shot down MH17. So there's a lot of speculation. But then nobody ever in court gave explanation for how this could have been a mistake.
This is a very important point, and you've said it, but I think for our viewers it bears repeating that the defendants in the trial were not accused, as I understand, of having actually shot it. They were accused of complicity in bringing the book system into rebel-held Ukraine.
Yes, and
that means then that the prosecution does not know, as you've just said, Eric. I'm sorry to repeat this, but it's very important. You are saying that the Dutch prosecution, does not know who shot it, or does not claim to know who shot it. Does not claim to know. Yeah.
And the European Court, the judges of the European Court repeated this, and they said it explicitly. We don't know who shot down MH17. It could have been a Russian crew, or it could have been rebels. We don't know. But but this doesn't matter, because the rebels, the DNR was in the Russia Federation was in control of the DNR area. This breakaway republic in 2014. It was then a breakaway republic. The Russians were in charge of this breakaway republic. So everything that happened from within this breakaway republic, the DNR, we can.
I would quibble with they were in charge. Okay, I mean the level of involvement of the Russian Federation during that time varied from place to place, from time to time. I'm not going to quibble with that. It's I can live with that. Eric, what role did Ukraine play in these investigations and trials? Because they're an interested party. Okay. And from what I understand, Malaysia was only added to the investigation late in the game. I mean, they weren't there. I mean, they're obviously an interested party here. But did Ukraine and its backers in the West, did they play a fair and equitable role during these trials?
Well, yes, as you said, so this investigation, this criminal investigation, it was done by 5 countries, police officers and prosecutors from the Netherlands, Belgium, Australia, Malaysia, and Ukraine. And so it's important to note that there have been 3 verdicts now from the Hague District Court, from the European Court of Human Rights, and also from the ICAO. This is the international. What's it called? International. Well, so this is the ICAO. So this is the International Civil Aviation Organization.
Yeah.
And they were all based on this investigation that was conducted by the JET, the Joint Investigation Team. And as you correctly mentioned, so Ukraine was part of this. So So this is something strange because, of course, they could have been involved in the downing of MH17. So why, this is of course this is absurd. You cannot have one.
Again, it's important for our viewers who may not have followed this as closely as you have to recall that this joint investigation team came to a conclusion, and then later, I think about a year later, the criminal trial started in a Dutch court. But this joint investigation team was conducted, as you said, by the Netherlands, Malaysia, various other countries. But the leader of it was, if I'm not mistaken, Eric, a former Dutch Secret Service officer or a counterterrorism officer. Is that right?
No, that's not correct. No, it isn't. This was another person. So no. You're mixing up things now. But it doesn't matter. But okay, no.
All right. But anyway, there was the JIT investigation, and
yes.
Then there was the criminal trial. And your book is about the criminal trial.
Yes, it's about the criminal trial, indeed. But then, the verdicts of the European Court of Human Rights, they came after. This year we had the verdicts of the Human Court of Human Rights and of the ICAO, but these are not of importance because they were all based on the criminal investigation of the JIT, and all evidence that was gathered by the joint investigation team, it was talked about in length during these 69 sessions of in the Hague District Court. So there hasn't been much information coming from the European Court and from the ICAO. So,
Eric, in looking at the trial that you covered, was there, in your opinion, in your observation, was there that Russia was at least implicitly guilty? I mean, was that their trajectory? Is that where they wanted to go? They wanted to prove they had an opinion and they developed a case to get to that conclusion, or did you think it was fair?
Well, de facto, there were 4 men standing trial, 4 individuals, 3 of them Russian, 1 Ukrainian. But then, in my view, during the court case, it became evident it wasn't about these 4 persons. It was about the Russian state standing a trial, because and in the verdict, during the verdict, immediately at the start of the verdict, when the judge spoke the verdict, he did not start talking about these 4 individuals. He started talking in his introduction. He started talking about the Russian state, being heavily involved in the Donbass revolt. So it became evident for me it wasn't about these 4 men.
And can you tell us, Eric, how the one man who was acquitted defended himself? What arguments did he present, and why do you think they were accepted by the court?
Well, his lawyers, the Dutch court case was about 3 questions that were raised by the defense lawyers of Pulatov. The first one: was MH17 downed with a Buk missile? Secondly, was this Buk missile fired from a rebels' territory? And third, was Pulatov somehow involved in the in the transport of this alleged murder weapon, this Buk Taylor? So this is what the court case was about, and this is how his defense lawyers defended him. They tried, to point to certain questions about, the weapon that was used. Was it the Buk missile? Was it really downed from rebels' territory? And was Pulatov somehow and then involved? And then the judges in the verdict, they said, they were certain it was a Buk missile, that it was fired from rebels territory, but then that Pulatov was not involved in the transport because they found this. So there were these phone intercepts. There have been dozens of phone intercepts that were talked about during the court case, and from this from these intercepts, it appeared that Pulatov could have known about the transport of a book tailor through rebels territory, but that he wasn't actively involved in the transport.
Do you believe you've already?
This is why he was acquitted, because he was not.
Well, you've already alluded to it, but I think it's worth pressing. Do you believe, in your opinion, if the other defendants had had the same kind of lawyers, they would have been acquitted as well?
Well, I think Gierking would have been acquitted because it was said that he somehow asked in Russia for a book tailor, but no evidence was presented for this claim. There's this phone call from Gierking to somebody in Crimea, telling this person he needed a new air defense system. He needed with crew, but then he didn't talk about the book tailor. And it wasn't even proven that he knew a book tailor was delivered from Russia to Ukraine. Has been no talk during the court case about such phone conversations about Gierking knowing Gierking's knowledge of the transport on the 17th of July.
So what you're saying then is that the acquittal pertained only to the individual Pulatov and might have possibly also pertained to other defendants if they had had lawyers, if they had defended themselves, but that the overall verdict of this court, this Dutch court, goes along with the official story, which is that it was shot down by a missile system provided by Russia to the Donbass rebels. But
Indeed,
you, Eric, don't find that part of the verdict convincing.
No, because even if you take it for a fact, MH17 was downed with a Buk missile, and even if you take it for a fact there was a book tailor present in rebels territory, this doesn't prove MH17 was shot down by this book tailor, because there were Ukrainian book tailors present, in eastern Ukraine. So
yes. Exactly.
Well, Eric, I mean, it seems to me that you're very well grounded in evidence, and that's excellent. Okay, and that will make reading your book worthwhile. But what in your opinion, in studying this, what are the alternative theories of why this was done? What is, intentionality in any court is almost impossible to prove. Okay, but that's what we're all left with. Why was this plane shot out of the air? And do you believe it could have been other than a Buk anti-missile system?
I'm not 100% certain it was a Buk missile. Many people, witnesses, so over 100 people have said they seen and heard fighter jets, around the moment MH17 came down. But then from Russia, but I think I'm willing to believe these people. But then I think these fighter jets were flying below the radar horizon, because the Russian defense ministry and also the Ukrainian defense ministry delivered these primary radar data, and there's nothing on the radar imagery. There's no plane, there's no airplane, there's no missile flying. So the fact that there's no missile flying can be explained by the supersonic speed, because these missiles fly 3-4 times the air. How do you say in English?
The speed of sound.
The speed of sound, yes, of course.
But sorry, which missiles? The Buk missiles?
Yes. Yes,
Mm.
they fly at hypersonic.
But the thing about people hearing fighter
supersonic
planes,
speed. Sorry,
that's
I should say supersonic speed. Yes, yes.
yeah.
So,
But sorry, Eric, the thing about people hearing fighter planes, that's nonsense, because you can't hear a fighter plane, you can't hear any plane at 30,000 feet at 10 kilometers. A plane that's flying overhead at 10 kilometers is silent on the ground. You can't hear anything. I assume that's true of a fighter plane as well. A commercial plane, you see planes cruising overhead at cruising altitude, you can't hear them. So if someone said they saw fighter planes, that's surely irrelevant, because you could only hear them if they were much lower.
I don't know about that, but you could be right. But then there's another thing. Okay, so I told you about the Russians and the Ukrainians delivering these radar images, but then the Americans said, John Kerry came on TV 3 days after the crash. He declared that the American intelligence community saw where the missile was launched. They saw the trajectory, and they saw where it ended up, at the last location where, MH17 disappeared from radar. But then they never delivered this evidence to the Dutch court. So why not?
Yeah.
There was a Sibris satellite hanging over the area, American Sibris satellite. So I know from the Russian side they do not. They also think the Americans might have the evidence, but they never presented it. So why not? The court asked for it. The prosecution service asked for it. The next of kin of the victims of the air crash, they asked for these satellite imagery. It was never presented by the US. So what is it? Is there something they want to hide from us?
Well, I mean, also, my first question to you, was it possible this was just a tragic mistake? Okay, you have answered that. But, given hindsight and what has happened since 2014, we have Ukrainian intelligence working very nefariously with their Western counterparts. Their Western counterparts actually built up Ukrainian intelligence since then. The spiderweb attack a few weeks ago, the targeted assassinations of non-military, non-intelligence people. I'm thinking of Daria Dugina, other targeted assassinations. My point is, in this whole MH17, I always go back to the same question. Who does this benefit?
Yes.
It certainly does not benefit Russia.
Yeah. So this made me thinking also, because if we take the intercepts for real, if these intercepts are not doctored, if they are real, then the Ukrainians knew that the Russians were bringing Book Taylor to Ukraine. In these phone conversations on the day before the crash, you can even hear where they were bringing this Book Taylor. So, but the Ukrainians said they were not flying over the area. After the crash, they said we were not flying on this day. We were not flying over the area. So why didn't they? If they knew the Russians were bringing a Book Taylor to the rebels, so why didn't they send a command unit or a fighter jet to destroy this Book Taylor? Because this was of great importance also for the civilian airliners flying over the area. The Ukrainians did not close the airspace, so this is something else we should talk about maybe. And so there were pre-warnings. There was a Book Taylor transported from Russia to Ukraine. Maybe, they just waited for this Book Taylor to be deployed there and make some pictures, and some nice pictures, and shoot some videos, and then shot down MH17 by themselves with their own Book Taylor. And then on the day of the crash, they presented the evidence. There's been a Russian Book Taylor in rebels territory. We show you the pictures here, and there was this photo of a smoke plume. So this was They said it was from the exhaust of the missile, you know, going up. So on the day after the crash, they already presented the evidence. Oh, this is an interesting picture also, because this is from a press conference of the Joint Investigation Team, 2016. Yes. So you can see here a motor casing of a Buk missile, and also the venturi of a Buk missile. So it was strongly suggested these were part of the missile that shot down MH17. But then later on, when there were engraved numbers on these missile parts, and then later, and they were revealed later on, and the public, there was this, the public was asked, you know, do you know where this, do you know something about this missile? And then the Russian Ministry of Defense, they conducted this press conference, and they said, well, we know perfectly well where this missile, this missile, we delivered this missile in 1986 to a Ukrainian unit. Yeah. And then the interesting part came during the court session. You know, I was waiting for them to come up with this, to talk about this evidence. And then they said, well, we don't think this is from the missile. We are not certain this is from the missile that shot down MH17, because it could have been from a missile that was fired before the crash or after the crash. So the Dutch public prosecutors never presented these missile parts as evidence that MH17 was shot down by this missile. So this was.
For obvious reasons, the MH17 story continues to be of importance to the Dutch people. But you have spent a lot of time and effort dissecting this process here. Have your objections or dissenting views, is that part of the public conversation in the Netherlands? Do people know what you've just been talking about with John and myself?
Well,
if they don't, why? Go ahead.
Well, I'm a former mainstream journalist. For years, I worked for a Dutch leading weekly. It's called Elsevier. But none of my former colleagues talk about my book. You know, they just keep silent because it's a taboo. You know, to ask questions about who was involved, if it was about Russian culpability. It's impossible to ask these questions in the mainstream spheres. The Dutch Parliament, there was this session scheduled in Dutch Parliament, and so they were about to talk about my book.
In a good way or a bad way?
No. Well, I don't know. But, no. There was a session scheduled about my book in the second quarter of this year. Well, it never happened. So it never happened. No. Because this is the only book, you know. This is the only book from a journalist who witnessed all sessions. So it's of importance. You know, also,
well, I mean, you would think
there have been numerous sessions.
Exactly. If this is such a public interest story for the people of the Netherlands, you would think there'd be many people like you. Many.
No.
I'm sorry, Eric. You should be doing the Epstein files, and everyone would be talking about it.
Well, we have an Epstein scandal in the Netherlands also. I'm investigating this now, but okay, that's for another discussion maybe.
But indeed, I get the impression. Of course, yes, it's vaguely speaking a sensitive issue, but I also get the impression it's a little bit like Bucha. The Bucha massacre of the alleged massacre of March 2022. We actually hear very little about Bucha. It's more or less been dropped. It had its function at the time, the spring of 2022, but you don't hear about it much anymore. And I get the impression that's true of MH17 as well, Eric. We don't hear about it very much, actually.
No, because the public thinks, this was a slam dunk case, as you initially thought so too, and it's not topic anymore. People think they know what happened, and and then there's this journalist coming up with a book, well. They think of me as a Kremlin asset or something like that, or a conspiracy thinker. But then.
And did your book do well in Dutch?
Not that good, because I was in talk with the main publisher, the Dutch publisher. He was interested, to publish my book, but then he ended the talks when he understood I was asking questions.
Yeah.
So well, then I decided to publish the book myself, and I published only I printed only 1,000 copies. Well, I think there are only 80 to be sold, leftovers. But then
that's very few.
I don't think there will be a second print.
And now you've produced an English version.
Yes.
Which is much shorter, I think, than the Dutch version. Is that right?
Yes, it's a summary, because I do not have the funding because for something like this you need a professional translator, and I do not have the funding for that. So, and also it's quite a risk. It's costly. My book is it's quite ominous. I think you've seen it. It's you can kill somebody, when you slap him on the head.
You can throw it at somebody. Yeah. Okay.
You can kill someone with this.
Yeah.
But then and the English.
But I can see there you've called it the M17 bedrog in Dutch. The cheat or the trick.
Yes.
You haven't given it that title in English.
No. It's the English title is more
neutral.
More neutral. Yes. It's more neutral. Yes.
Yeah. So, in your opinion, obviously this is a tragedy, and that's how I've always approached it. And I want to know what happened. Whoever is involved, whoever's at fault, we should know. Why something like that happened. But do you just see it, the way it was approached legally is just part of the information warfare that we have? Because I think John's kind of already hinted to it. I mean, it served its purpose.
Yeah,
it didn't matter what happened. It's already served its purpose.
Yeah, because the Americans were pushing the Europeans for more severe sanctions against Russia. And then when MH17 was down, John Kerry came up on TV and he said, we hope this was a wake-up call for the Europeans.
Yes, it's very important to recall that. I haven't said that yet, but it's true that he said this was the wake-up call. This was the moment at which the Europeans, who had not wanted to go along with sanctions, went along with sanctions.
Yes. And also, in 2014, the Americans started sending weapons to Ukraine. They started militarily supporting Ukraine. Yeah. And I think it was a tectonic shift. This MH17 downing, it was a tectonic shift between Russia and Europe. Yeah, because I think since 2014 everything changed after the downing of MH17. The Crimea, the reunification from Crimea with Russia was one thing, because then the sanctions started. But then MH17, it was something completely different, I think, in the view of the Europeans.
Yes.
Yeah.
Eric, I haven't prepared this question, so I can't remember the dates, but some of our viewers, I'm sure, will know that another Malaysian airliner crashed around the same time in the Indian Ocean and disappeared from view. Have you looked at that at all? Is that of any relevance to the MH17 case?
Well, there have been some theories about that. I never fully investigated the other plane, because this was, as you say, a Malaysian plane also from Malaysia Airlines. It disappeared 4 months before the MH17 crash took place.
Did they ever find the plane?
I don't think
They
so.
say they found parts of the plane, but I'm not even sure about that. If these pieces were really part of this plane that disappeared. But this investigation is still going on. I read somewhere some time ago. Yeah.
Yes,
They're still searching for the plane. Yes. Or they again started searching for the plane. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean of course the suspicion, which we might as well voice out loud, is that which is more or less explicit in what we've said up to now, is that there is a possible alternative scenario, which is that it was shot down by the Ukrainian side for the reasons that we've just been discussing. In other words, to galvanize the Europeans into action. That's definitely what Xavier Moreau has been saying ever since 2014. He claims that it was shot down, by the way, from the air, as I understand, not from a ground-to-air missile.
Yes.
But
I mean, Eric, you said you talked to this expert in you said Finland, correct?
Yeah.
Yes. I visited him in his museum. I went into.
I think we have a video of you getting into a book. I'm not sure if we can put that up. There's a picture of you. There we are. There you are, actually getting into the belly of the beast. This shows the extent of your investigations, because this was in Finland, right, Eric? Eric seems to have disappeared.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was in Finland. Yes.
Well, I mean, again, it appears to me that there was a decided outcome, and they worked their way towards it. But I mean, given the fact that there are those that believe it was shot at from a plane shot it out of the air, who would be able to make that kind of decision? Or were other experts asked to look at the wreckage and say, no, this is I don't, for lack of a better term, bullets from a turret? I mean, how much credence was given to alternative theories of the case here? Because if you focus on the book, you're going to fit it together. If it doesn't fit very well, they're still going to push it together. How many alternative theories were entertained, if at all?
Well, according to the defense lawyers of Pulatov, no alternative theories were investigated, or at least not seriously investigated, because right from the start, this Russian book scenario was focused on. The focus was put on this Russian book scenario right from the start. So, but there have been many technical experts who looked at the damage of the plane. Also, almost Antai. So this is the company, the Russian company that produced the Beek missile system. So they also looked at the damage, and according to them, from the damage, it appears the missile came from another direction. It didn't come from rebels' territory. It came from from a direction where Ukrainian units could have been deployed.
So the manufacturer thinks it was brought down by a book.
The manufacturer doesn't exclude the possibility MH17 was downed by a book. But if MH17 was downed by a book, they say it must have been an older type of missile. Because there were particles found. They had this bow tie, and in the older type of book missiles, there were no bow ties. So almost Antai thinks, because there's these exit holes that were found in the cockpit, and they should have had a bow tie shape, but they hadn't. So this is why almost Antai thinks if it was a book missile, it couldn't have been the new type of Buk missile, and the Russian military says we were not using the older type of Buk missiles anymore. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's from what you've told us. I mean, Russia was on trial from what you observed, but Russia had no defense.
No, they hadn't. No. And I must say, they
were excluded, of course, from the
invited.
investigation. Yeah, from the JIT investigation. Yeah. One of the things I remember from reading the English version of your book, which we haven't mentioned, is the fact that the shell of the at least the front part of the plane, the cockpit, which was famously put on show in the Netherlands, when the JIT opened its investigation, had taken many months to be retrieved. It was not retrieved quickly. Yes. In other words, there's no safety of in terms of the custody of the evidence.
No. This is another sideline of the story. This is absurd. Already on this 18th of July, there were Dutch investigators who were in Kiev, and then they wanted to go to the area where the plane had crashed, but then the Ukrainian government kept them from going there because they said, we cannot guarantee your safety. But then there were also Malaysian experts, air crash investigators who went to Kiev, who were there also on the 18th of July. And well, the Ukrainian authorities also tried to keep them from going there, going to the crash area. But then they went secretly, and so this is how they got their hands on the flight data recorder and on the cockpit voice recorder, because the rebels, they handed them the black boxes over, and so
I didn't know that.
This on TV, in Kiev. But then, but the Dutch went back to the Netherlands in beginning in the first week of August, and never. So, the international press was there, the Ukrainians were there, the Malaysians were there, the whole world was there, but the Dutch, they never went as far as Kiev. But then only 4 months after the crash, they finally went there and they collected some debris, and they already the Ukrainian rescue team, they collected the body. How do you say? The people who ended up in the plane, who
the casualties.
Yes. Casualties, yeah. They took care of it.
So, Eric, what you're saying then is that the flight recorders, the black boxes, and the wreckage of the plane, and of course the bodies of the victims, these were all handed over, or certainly, I don't know about the bodies, but certainly the flight recorders and the fuselage and so on, they were handed over by the rebels.
Well,
who had them?
The rebels didn't keep the Dutch recovery team from collecting the debris, so they even helped them, yes. To collect
this material, this evidence was in rebel territory,
yes,
and the rebels provided it, or at least didn't prevent them from coming and collecting it.
Yes, indeed. And they
but again, surely that is it's not proof one way or the other. But it's incriminating evidence for them. So surely they should have hidden it if they thought they were guilty. No.
Well, of course, some maybe one cannot say. Maybe some material was hidden. We don't know. We can.
Yeah. Well, I think that was my first comment about Russian-controlled rebel area. Watching this conflict from 2014 to this day, particularly from 2014 to 2022, using the term Russian control, you got to use that really loosely, okay? Because, and it's something that people don't want to talk about here, but I will speak truth, is that there was a lot of criminality also, because it was a breakdown of order, and it was a tough place to live, and I've known scores and scores of people that left the Donbass to move to Moscow, not for just purely patriotic reasons. Say it's safer here. Okay,
Yeah.
There's a lot going on. It's very chaotic. They were being shelled by the Kiev regime, and a lot of people died. And social order was not what it should have been. Let's put it that way. So the fact that these people were saying here, first of all, this plane drops out of the sky onto our village here, they were very forthcoming. It shows who's in control is neither here and there in a situation like that. I just thought I should say that.
Yeah,
that's all.
And I would add, by the way, that the law on this is less clear than people, or rather less strict, I would say, than people might think. What I mean by that is that if one country is supporting military operations in another country, as of course Russia was accused of supporting and indeed instigating the Donbass rebellion from 2014, in criminal law, that does not necessarily mean that the supporting country bears criminal responsibility for what the recipients of the aid do. It doesn't imply control. And the reason I say this is that in a similar case involving Yugoslavia, involving Serbian support for the Bosnian Serbs in the Bosnian Civil War between 1992 and 1995, when that case finally went to the International Court of Justice and was ruled on in 2007, the judges found that although Serbia was, of course, helping the Bosnian Serbs, at least for the early years of that conflict, that didn't mean that Serbia in any way controlled what the Bosnian Serbs were doing. And so by analogy, the same might, if it was ever adjudicated in the same way, might also apply to Russia, even if we accept, which of course Russia denied at the time, that it was officially supporting the Donbass rebels.
Well, and John, to add on to that, again, one of the things that Western audiences are never told, from 2014 to 2022, it wasn't the problem wasn't Russian involvement in the Donbass. For the people in Donbass, it was the lack of Russian involvement in the Donbass. They were extremely critical of Putin for not helping them enough. That story, I remember seeing documentaries made in the Donbass cursing Vladimir Putin. Yeah,
sure. But the point is this, and I know you understand this, Peter and Eric, but I want to say it so that our viewers understand it. The reason why the alleged or real Russian involvement in the Donbass is so important is that the Ukrainians refused from the Minsk agreements onwards, 2014, 2015, to treat the Donbass as an internal Ukrainian problem. That's the whole root of this current war. They signed up to it in late 2014 and then again in February 2015, that it was an internal problem. But they always, in their public speeches, claimed that it was a Russian invasion, and that is the political and legal significance of the MH17 issue. Because if the Donbass rebellion was a Russian invasion, Russia occupying the Donbass in 2014, then of course it wasn't an internal Ukrainian problem to be solved through negotiation, but instead a war in which Ukraine had to repel these Russian forces or proxy Russian forces from its own territory. That's the key issue. I'm sorry, I know you understand this, but I just wanted to spell it out.
Very good summary. Very good summary.
Yeah. Eric, we've been flashing up on the screen, I think it's still there, or it certainly has been, the internet address where we can buy your book, ericvanderbeek.nl, all one word, Eric van der Beek. There it is. And I encourage our viewers to go onto that website and to order your book because, as I say, it's a unique book, and you have played now a unique role in this. You're the only person who followed the trial, and nobody else knows it as well as you do. So, Eric, I'm extremely grateful to you for giving us your time. I believe you're traveling at the moment, so I'm very aware that you've made extra time for us to be with us this week, and I very much hope that our viewers will consult your book and come to their own conclusions. Eric van der Beek, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much for having
All
me.
the best. Thank you. Bye.